The other piece we wanted to bring to you this morning is a pretty interesting moment on Piers Morgan's show. He had on Julian Assange's wife and had her directly respond to John Bolton, saying that Assange should be in prison for hundreds of years. Let's take a listen to a little bit of that exchange.
Their extradition should go forward. And when he gets to the United States, he'll get due process here. And I hope he gets at least 176 years in jail for what he did.
Stella?
Well, of course, Ambassador Bolton is kind of the ideological nemesis of Julian. He has, during his time for the Bush administration and later the Trump administration, sought to undermine the international legal system, ensure that the U.S. is not under the International Criminal Court's jurisdiction. And if it was, Mr. Bolton might, in fact, be prosecuted under the ICC. He was one of the chief cheerleaders of the Iraq War, which Julian then exposed through these leaks. So he has a conflict of interest here.
Ambassador Bolton?
Well, that's ridiculous. I have an opinion. So does Assange's wife. I guess we both get to speak them. I think that what she fears is being brought to the United States and having Assange put under trial. If he's innocent, she can at least show reasonable doubt that he's not guilty, he'll go free. What's she worried about?
I guess what she's worried about is a fair trial, because it's pretty clear what the attitude towards him is.
Well, let her say
a large number of Americans.
That's fine. Let her say Julian Assange cannot get a fair trial in America. Let her say it.
Okay.
Well, he cannot get a fair trial in America because he is being prosecuted under the Espionage Act, and he cannot bring a public interest defense.
I don't know why he thought that was such an own to be like, let's hear her say he can't get a fair trial in the U.S. She's like,
he
can't.
You can't get a fair trial in the U.S. And, well, I think we should explain what she's saying, which is that under the Espionage Act, you're not actually allowed to bring the same defense that the Pentagon Papers defense was able to have.
You can't basically say, I'm a whistleblower.
Right.
I'm exposing government wrongdoing.
Right. And it was written specifically in the way such that if the government does bring it, you're litigating it only on the details, not in the way that the original Pentagon Papers case was prosecuted. Part of the actually biggest probably misunderstandings that we have looked at with regards. Anyway, the point is that if you do prosecute him under the Espionage Act, then essentially all aspects of journalism have been compromised under the potential for prosecution under the Espionage Act, because all acts of journalism dealing with classified information, including things I have done, involve actively soliciting and reaching out to people with high national security clearance and being like, hey, tell me what you know. And sometimes they do, of which I've reported, of which every reporter in Washington has done so. And technically, they would be able to prosecute me for doing my job, which should be protected under the First Amendment.
Which is exactly why the Obama administration, who hated Assange, just as every other president since then has, decided they could not prosecute him. Now, they did all sorts of other terrible things to him, but they could not prosecute him without also implicating mainstream publishers like the Washington Post, like the New York Times, et cetera. That's also why the Washington Post and New York Times, I don't talk about it much now, but why they were opposed to Assange ultimately being prosecuted, because they feared what it would mean for the First Amendment overall. Now, what's wild, I mean, it's not surprising, but John Bolton went on to spout all of the most, disingenuous and misleading talking points about Assange, called him a hacker and a criminal, and said that he put our men and women at risk. Glenn always points this out. Don't you think if there was a single service member or, intelligence asset whose life was harmed or even directly put at risk by Assange's revelations, we would know all about it. They were desperate to find that person, and they never did. So all they can do is what Bolton does ultimately in this interview and say, just generally, their lives were put at risk. Really? Who? What? When? Prove it. You can't. And ultimately, the other thing they try to do is paint it like, oh, he's not anything like a publisher. And it was interesting because Bolton tried to say it's a mistake for the Washington Post and the New York Times to take Assange's side, because then that does put them at risk. It's like, no. It's the prosecution of Assange that has put them ultimately at risk, not their rightful understanding of what this could mean for the First Amendment. So, I really applaud Stella Assange there for for being able to keep her cool and, you know, make it clear how she felt about John Bolton, but without sort of losing it the way that I probably would if I was face to face with John Bolton there. But, you know, these ridiculous talking points never ultimately die. And to hear them come out of Bolton's mouth is really something.
No, yeah. I mean, I thought it was a valuable exchange. I mean,
Yeah.
something you never see on cable television. So I guess props to Piers for holding it. It's just,
He's not afraid of the conflict, that's for sure, that guy.
yeah, I guess he's a strange cat. You know, I just saw him today talk about how you don't, anyway, talking about being anti-free speech. I never can pin Piers. Part of why I think he's an interesting figure in his own right.
And enraging, oftentimes.
Yeah, I mean, he's both like pro-Ukraine, pro-war, but I guess I mean, when else have you seen Stella Assange on cable television in the United States? I haven't seen it.
He's clearly backing her up.
Yeah,
too.
and he was backing her up. He was quasi-weirdly civil libertarian, but then anti-gun when he had his CNN show. Anyway, this is turning into a much deeper conversation with Piers Morgan. It was a good segment, and I appreciated it, and I thought it highlighted something important.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing, and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.